Welcome to episode 65 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast featuring conversations in Canadian theatre. On Stageworthy, I sit down with actors, directors, playwrights, and more and talk to them about their life in the theatre. If you like what you hear, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use, and consider leaving a comment or rating. If you want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. My guest is actor, director, and playwright DJ Sylvis. DJ is one of the founding members of Toronto's geekiest theatre company, Monkeyman Productions, and its playwright-in-residence. So DJ, I guess a place that I want to start with you is, when did you start with theater? Not necessarily writing, or like, what was your introduction to theater?
It probably would have been, and I didn't think of it as theater for a long time. I was raised in a really conservative, religious atmosphere. I went to a Christian school. All of my social activities were through church, and literally didn't know the rest of the world was out there. It was that sort of childhood. So what I knew was church performances. I knew skits and musicals for Christmas and things like that. And I always did well in those, and I had a pretty good singing voice, and so I'd always get into choir and all of those things. So it wasn't until I switched back to public school, which would have been... Well, I switched back and forth a few times, but my senior year, I really sort of had started to rebel, and I was my parents had divorced a year before that, and so I was kind of I am going to experience the public school system before I try to strike out on my own. And that was when I sort of realized that theater was a separate thing, and certainly something I wanted to get involved in. I wasn't.
Do you remember what it was? Sorry, just to jump in there. Do you remember what theater was something you wanted to get involved in? When did you get a sense of that? Was there something going on at school that you heard about, or? Well,
I think it would have started through choir, because in choir, of course, we did show tunes.
Yeah, of course.
And then they had a sort of show choir thing, but I wasn't a great dancer, so I wasn't going to do that. And in fact, my first real show as such was the musical my senior year was Little Abner. And I played Mary and Sam, which is one of the supporting leads.
Okay.
And was in fact, speaking of dancing, was such a terrible dancer that Mary and Sam has one huge song at the wedding for Abner and whatever her name is, Ellie Mae or whatever. Okay. But Ellie Mae is whatever the other thing. But anyway, so the big wedding, and they started me out in the center, because it's my big song. They started me out in the center, doing all the same dance as everyone else. They slowly moved me further and further to the side until I was standing, far stage left, singing, and everyone else was dancing.
Is it during the song they start doing?
Well, no, over the course of rehearsals. Oh, they were like, DJ, could you just move a little further over and just let them?
In terms of after that. So that was a taste of what you wanted to do.
Yeah, and actually I decided, just solely based on that, and based on my the acting teacher, Bill Kennedy, being one of my favorite professors, professors and high school teachers, that I applied for university as an acting major, having done virtually nothing else.
Some schools really want that, though.
That's true. And this was a very small state school in Western Pennsylvania, Clarion University. And I started out as an acting major. I auditioned, was accepted into the program. I auditioned with, this is the kind of person you are as a freshman. I auditioned with Cyrano de Bergerac and Macbeth.
Okay.
So, not taking on anything overly grand. Right? So, but I got into the program, and I did okay for a while, and then again, dance started to kill me. You have to pass Dance 1 and Dance 2 to be an acting major. I worked my ass off every day at Dance 1 and barely squeaked by. And I was like, there's no way I'm passing the next class.
It's funny. I mean, I know a lot of schools, they are, in their minds, they're like, we're preparing you to do as much as possible in the theater.
Yeah.
And that means musical theater, you know, you can do straight theater, but we want to make sure that you're ready for musical theater, which means we're going to try to teach you to dance, but to hinge, like, passing on dance, because not every, I mean, I don't dance that well. And if my becoming an actor had hinged on my ability to dance, I would certainly not be doing anything.
But I think it turned out to be a good thing because, I mean, and I acted a lot after that. I switched majors a few times and wound up graduating with a Bachelor of Science in General Studies, which tells you about how far I sort of wandered afield. But found out pretty quickly in university after that I liked to write. I mean, I'd always liked to write. I've written poems and short stories and stuff all my life, pretty much. But then sort of started to apply that to theater and had a few things produced as an undergrad. But then wound up again. It's like middle of nowhere in Western Pennsylvania. I got married I took a year of grad school, didn't really like it that much. Got married. My first wife was a middle school English teacher, and so we wound up moving around a lot for her to have work. And I was in little towns where there was barely community theater, much less any sort of professional work. So I acted a lot. I did a lot of musicals. I did practically everything Gilbert and Sullivan have ever written.
Yeah. Wow.
I did The Wizard of Oz. But it wasn't until I actually moved up here, moved to, when I got married the second time, moved to Canada, and then eventually Toronto, that I started sort of like producing things myself and writing things for the company and all that.
When you were first starting to write for theater, is there, because I know for me, I don't remember, I find it hard to remember when I started writing for theater, but I know that once I started, that's where my brain went. And so I'm almost I find it difficult to write not theater. Do you remember when you started to realize, like, started to want to write for theater, or when that became a thing for you?
I still have the first thing I wrote for theater. I still have the files going back, because again, it started at university. My first play, and this is kind of ironic considering the places that Monkeyman has gone since then. My first play was a 10-minute play about Godzilla in iambic pentameter.
Okay, so I have to. I wasn't surprised by the Godzilla. I was a little surprised by the iambic pentameter.
And it's terrible. I mean, everything I wrote in university is terrible. I was just starting to get used to it.
Everybody's first plays are terrible. Hell, everybody's first drafts are usually. I know mine.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, when you moved to Toronto, to Canada, and you started thinking about producing your own stuff, was that? Were you trying to go the route of try to get other theaters to do your stuff, or did you immediately know that you wanted to do this stuff yourself?
No, I tried to do it that way. Again, a lot of my experience was in very small towns, and I didn't really know how you went about. I had written plays. I'd had a play produced in Pittsburgh, actually, a play of mine called A Night at the Warhol. My friend Mike from university had started his own little company down in Pittsburgh, and he produced it, and so we had done that, but I didn't know how you worked as a playwright beyond that. So I moved up here, and I moved to Toronto. I knew there were theaters. I started sending out, I'm sure it was one of the first drafts of Godzilla on Sundays, which was my first big piece of work.
Right.
And sent it to of course, shooting for the top, sent it to Factory, and sent it to Tarragon, and never heard a word back from them, because why would they?
Yeah. I mean, generally, I definitely want to talk a little later about pop culture and geek culture in theater, because I know that's something that Monkeyman has done. That's sort of where your brain goes as far as a lot of playwriting goes.
Absolutely.
But Godzilla on Sundays, it's not really Factory, Tarragon kind of fair.
No.
But of course, you didn't you write a play, you send it out. That's what you do. How long between writing Godzilla on Sundays to doing that at the New Ideas Festival?
I think it was probably... I'm trying to think back now. Because, God, that would have been... No, I'm trying to think of when I first moved, because I moved to Canada in 2003, moved to Toronto in 2004, so it was probably 2004, 2005 that I was first writing it, and then it would have been 2007 when New Ideas did it, and then we started the company in 2008. Well, I guess it would have been spring of 2008 then the New Ideas did it.
So the that show, that New Ideas Festival, that particular play was like the formative thing for Monkeyman Productions. Is that where you met Marty? Is that where you met the core group?
I knew Marty a little bit from NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, but only as, this is a person I've seen across the room.
Right.
We had never really talked or hung out or anything. But then I did get Godzilla into New Ideas, and he was one of the director candidates, and we did at least recognize each other enough from that, and he had read the script because you couldn't read the scripts beforehand, and he had liked it, and we chatted and we clicked, and no one else there. There was really no one else there that either of us were that interested in working with.
Did you find when people were reading it, were there other people who were interested in directing it, or New Ideas is this festival at the Alumni Theater, which is, a great place for playwrights to get their stuff done for the first time.
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing. Probably the Godzilla thing is not something that a lot of the people there were particularly familiar with at the time.
And I don't think, I don't want to, puff up my own ego and say that we've sort of introduced geek theater to Toronto. I don't think that's true, but I feel like we were part of the crest of that wave, and I don't think that anyone was doing plays like that at that point.
I don't think that there are people... I still have to say that I don't think there are people who are doing it regularly. There might be an occasional single play that comes up, usually at Fringe or something like that, where it's look, we're nerds too! And it's something like that, and maybe Sex T-Rex is sort of an example of taking some really nice geek tropes and putting them on the stage, but
and they do a lot of good stuff at Bad Dog, stuff that ties in.
I don't think anybody has really there's anybody else who's done on a regular basis straight up plays that are of the kind of stuff that you've written, which are specifically plays that deal with either things in pop culture or people who are basically nerds or geeks. Which is very... I think it's unusual. In a good way, just to put that out there. I think...
I would hope so. You've done...
I've done a few of them.
Several of them.
But I do think that it's... that nerd culture is something that it's portrayed... we see it in books, and we see it on TV, and we see it in movies, but I don't think it finds its way on the stage very often. And I wonder... And please pipe in if you think that I'm full of shit, or if you agree with me. If it's... Theater often thinks of itself as too important to deal with these sorts of things. It wants to deal with big themes rather than people who like movies and books and TV and comic books.
I think that's fair, and I think that it kind of ties too into... I know that you've read Jordan Tanahill's book, Theater of the Unimpressed. We were talking about it sort of back and forth before, that the idea of the great play, and I think that there's an idea that even contemporary playwrights should be trying to write the great play of this time, and because I didn't sort of make my bones in that kind of culture, and I was more soaked in as a kid, soaked in comic books and pulp novels and stuff, that I just want to tell the story, and these are the stories that come out of my head. So.
It's interesting because to talk about the Jordan Tanahill thing, there are parts of that book that I find myself nodding, the well-made play and everything resolved and things like that. I'm nodding my head a lot to that. There's stuff where it almost seems like he's talking about, I'm with him in that book until he's talking about how awesome he is, and then I'm
and that's
no, you can stop now. But most of what he's talking about is, I think he's right about the way that theater has been created here. And it's interesting because Monkeyman, I mean, didn't create plays in that way. Almost in some ways, I mean, like indie theater, like as indie as you can get. Like, how do we get this on a stage as cheaply as possible?
Well,
and
you know,
exactly. Well, I mean,
for sure.
In terms of you guys, when you came together, you sort of. Did you have a vision for what you wanted Monkeyman to be, or was it just like, let's be nerdy and be proud of it in theater?
I think it was just, and we can sort of loop back around to that original production of Godzilla on Sundays by talking about this, that I had met Marty, and when we decided we wanted to do it, the original draft of Godzilla on Sundays and the version that we did later on to produce ourselves is like an hour and a half. We had a 45-minute slot at New Ideas, and we decided that instead of trying to tell half the story, we would condense the entire play down to 45 minutes. So that was fun, but we managed it. And so Marty was like, "Well, I know these two actors. I used to do stuff with him at Ryerson when he was there. That was Brad Rowe and Tim Nussey." And so we went through that production, and it was awesome for us. I mean, I think New Ideas liked us well enough. They kept doing my plays after that, but didn't quite know what to do with us. But afterwards, we had such a good time that really we formed the company because we were like, none of us are having experiences like this in theater. Let's keep doing that.
Yeah. In terms of like when you're condensing this 90-minute play into 45 minutes, and to be honest, I think that New Ideas, they almost never want to do a play that long.
Oh, yeah.
Was it hard to convince them to do 45 minutes, or were they like...
Well, no, that was the slot they gave me.
Okay.
I didn't know a lot about the festival before. I didn't know a lot about the company before. I was submitting to anything that I thought it might fit into. And they did say, like, in the call that they would do, like, pieces of larger plays. So I think the difficult part was, again, trying to talk them afterwards into saying that we thought the better idea was to give the audience the full story, even if we sort of had to do it at running speed. So... Yeah,
I mean... Yeah, because I know they tend not to like the really long stuff. They can fit more into a night if it's shorter stuff. But I mean, they've done done. There's a bunch of stuff that they've done that's like really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean they've changed that rule since then, because Inked Art was the same thing. Inked Art was like, I mean, I only had the first act at that point, but it was 45 minutes, and they said that was the longest slot they gave. They don't do that anymore. No, I think the longest slot now is 15 minutes.
I think it's 15 or 20 minutes. I think the last time I did it, it was. Like, I think we were going into 25 minutes, and they kept being like, "It's got to be 20 minutes, guys. It's got to be 20 minutes, guys." But they let us go 25. But that was like as far as they'd push us, or they'd let us push. Yeah. Out of that play, what was the first truly Monkeyman production? What was the first thing that you guys did when it was under the banner of Monkeyman Productions?
I think it probably would have been the first. Monkey Sci-Fi Horror Theater, because our first production was we did a co-production with another company. I blanked on their name now, but it was called Theater of the Obsessed, and it was like we did 3 short pieces of mine that were all kind of thrown together a little bit, and they did a 1-person 45-minute piece about some like alien abduction story, and it was kind of cool, and so it kind of fit in with our sort of theme too. But after that, I think it was the next show after that was Monkey Sci-Fi Horror Theater, which was the second version, the original version of Final Flight of the Phoenix had been in our first production, but the better, like, sort of improved version of Final Flight of the Phoenix, which was sort of my takeoff on Star Trek, and Dead Man's Party, which was our zombie apocalypse play.
Right. In terms of so that was like a double bill. Yeah. And do you remember? At what point did you write these pieces? Okay, so you wrote Final Fight of the Phoenix, and you did that at this sort of like double bill or that triple bill. When you were thinking about doing that again, had you already written Dead Man's Party, or were you? Was that something that you were like? I need to write something for a second piece.
Yeah, I think Dead Man's Party was new. I think Dead Man's Party came out of the idea that one of the best things, and like some of our core members, like Brad, sort of drifted away a little bit, and Tim's sort of had to focus more on work in the past few years. But in those first years, we would go and we would have company meetings that were literally just us sitting there for 2 hours, laughing our asses off, making like inside jokes that would never work, like just goofing off ideas and stuff. And so Dead Man's Party was sort of the idea that we would just do that on stage. It was just written for like all four of us to act together, because like I again like never planned on acting again, but it was just for the chance for us to be like big goofballs on stage together, and deciding that hey, if we have fun with that, maybe people will have fun watching it.
And they seem to.
Yeah, I think it.
Can I ask you about your writing? Like, if you have a process for writing, can you just? Well, do you have a process for writing, or are you one of those like I sit down and I write and then I fix? Cause that's how I write. I sit down and like I'm gonna start writing and I'll fix it later.
Yeah, but you're a lot better. I actually feel like you're a lot better at this point at like the practice than I am, as far as you actually make yourself write regularly, and you're pretty good about like writing every day or every few days, whereas I have whole months at a time or several months that'll go by where I just can't push myself to do it. The day job is too much, and everything else is just sort of getting on me. But at the same time, it's still building and building until you just can't help but do it. And I'm sort of at that point right now. And we can talk later about like what our current project is if you want to. But the current project we're supposed to be working on, I had a meeting with Marty and with Lisa last fall and said, okay, I'm going to have a draft for you by the end of January. And then the election happened, and the world fell apart. And I mean, one of the things is just sort of like, and I think all artists everywhere are doing this right now, just sort of questioning what you create. In the aftermath of that,
I have to say, I feel that way. It's like I started as something, and occasionally, the worse it gets, the more I'm like, is this enough? Is this enough? Do I have to like? I feel like I need to be like writing something more. I need to start like being angrier. Well, no, I don't need to be angry. I need to start taking that anger and putting it on paper.
Yeah, because we mostly do like kind of silly stuff, and it's got a heart, and it's got important stuff in it, but it's fairly light and fairly silly, and so certainly the project that I pitched was going to be like that, and now it's just, do I have the right to sort of take the time for that, and do I have the right to? I mean, at least right now, when things are so bad and things are like I feel like I can't. I've got a bad I can't really go to marches and stuff, but I feel like I have to give every spare dollar to places, and I feel like I have to be following the news and writing my MP every day and stuff. That how do I switch tracks from that to writing a silly little my Ripley's Believe It or Not takeoff, which is kind of what I'm playing with right now.
It's hard to figure that. It's hard to do that. To have this sustained. I feel like I'm somewhere between sustained anger and sustained mourning, or something, somewhere in the middle of that, and I find that occasionally, the way that I look at Facebook now or on social media is just like I used to enjoy it, and now I feel like I have to keep on. I need to know what's going on.
Oh yeah,
but more in the terms of just almost horror of what's going on in the world.
So I mean, it's just how do you do your work? I mean, do your creative work after that, and especially knowing that, and there are people who write tremendous political plays, and God love them, and it's amazing. That's never going to be my thing. So, despite the fact that I would love to be able to use my talent and immediately switch tracks to being able to, that's not what I'm good at, and so I have to find ways to sort of take the things I am good at and maybe make them more aware and make them a little more awake.
One of the things, I mean, you said earlier about how I'm doing more, making my practice is maybe more advanced than yours, but I'm gonna come clean and say there's a lot of times when I sit with a notebook and, I have my phone, so maybe I look a little more on Facebook.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But one of the things that I do is there are nights of the week where I go and I write. I leave work And I'm still looking for the right place, because you need sort of like, if you don't have an office at home, which I don't, my office is in the living room, you need like a place where you feel like you can sit for a while and write, and there's not too much going on. You feel like it feeds you. And I'm still trying to find the right place, but I sit for 2 hours with my notebook or whatever it is that I'm writing in this week. And I sit, and there are 2 hours there with me and this notebook.
Yeah.
And so I do something, but there are nights that I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this thing. I want to go home and I want to fire up my Xbox and I want to shoot things and I don't want to think. But there are the nights that I know that I'm writing, and that's one of the things that I've found has improved my writing chances, like my ability to write stuff, is just by setting aside the time. It's like non-negotiable. Yeah. And I think that, maybe for some of that time, like an hour of that time, maybe I'm staring at my notebook, thinking about all the political things. But after a while, I think it goes away. And I think we do have a right to, and a need to write light stuff. Like there's got to come a time people need a break. Yeah. It's like when bad things happen, we can rage for a little while, but we do need a break from rage. And the stuff that you write and stuff that I tend to write, because I'm not I don't write really political stuff. I never have, and that's not where my head goes. I want to write lighter stuff than that. I mean, some of it's serious, but I like to write some stuff. Yeah. And I don't know that if that's not where we are comfortable writing, I don't think we should force ourselves to do that. You mentioned that other project that you sort of like. Is there anything you could tell us about that? Because Monkeyman, you guys had a production that you were going to do, and due to an actor having to leave, you couldn't continue with it.
Yeah, this would have been fall of 2015. We were getting ready to do, and it still breaks my heart a little to talk about it, because I think it's still one of the best things I've written. A play of mine called The Beast from Planet X, which was sort of a mashup of sort of a straight office play and 50s sci-fi. And it was sort of exploring how the culture of fear has changed. A lot of the old cheesy sci-fi movies, Forbidden Planet, things like that I was drawing from were about the things that America was afraid of at that point. Yeah. The unknown, nuclear energy, all sorts of things like that. And so I was sort of contrasting that with the things we're afraid of now, which have changed quite a bit, and a lot of them are usually more internalized. We're afraid of people on our doorstep. We're not afraid of what might face us in the unknown. So it was something that was sort of, I felt like it was going to be a big step for us. Right. And we had put a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy into it. And one of our main actors had a death in the family and had to leave the country to deal with it. And obviously you can't feel bad about that for their sake. You can't fault them. But it was someone who it was impossible to replace in time, and we had serious talks about it and decided that there was nothing we could do. We had to halt the production. It was, in particular, the character was had been written, and this was something that Marty had brought to it. And one of the coolest things from our collaboration on the piece was making this character non-binary. And so we had gone out of our way to, we're writing our first non-binary character. We don't want to cast...
You don't want to cast somebody, you don't want to cast a cis male or something.
Exactly, to play that part. And so we had found an amazing non-binary actor to play that part, and they had to cut out. And we had to pull our hair out to find someone for that as it was. We were never going to be able to recast that in time. So we pulled out. Unfortunately, we couldn't pull out of our rental contract. No. And
that's painful.
$3,000 down the drain. We tried to do a series of readings to sort of just fill the space, and some of those were fun. I actually, for one of them, I rewrote Godzilla gender swapped it.
Okay.
Which was kind of fun without changing the gender of the spouse that had been sort of the point of contention. So that was kind of fun, and there were some other things. We had a reading of one of Kat Sadler's pieces and did a similar thing, gender swapped the characters, and that was kind of fun, but absolutely no money out of it. Yeah. In fact, we unfortunately lost more money for the friend who helped produce it.
That can really put the kibosh on stuff.
Yeah, so we sat down after that and said, it's not even just the money. I mean, okay, we're down to a fourth of our operating budget, but just nobody could face trying to move from that into creating something new a few months later. So we decided we were going to take 2016 and just go on hiatus.
And after taking that break, because I think at one point there might have been some talk about doing I want to call it the banana, whatever it was called after all. 'Cause I think it was the Banana Festival at one time, and then it was the.
Now you've got me.
Else.
Now you've got me blanking. But yeah, we were getting ready. We already had the call for scripts out for our spring festival, and we had about 150, 200 submissions, and I had to go back and email each of them and say, sorry, we're not producing theater in 2016, and we're not sure how we're going to come back. So,
can I? After did you guys take a break from each other in 2016, or were you meeting to talk about what 2017 was? It's fair.
In that, I saw Marty a few times, and I saw Lisa a few times, but we didn't actually get together until mid-fall to sit down as Monkeyman and start talking about what, if anything, we were going to bring back. And actually, our first meeting was just that, just sitting down and saying, do we want to come back? Can we come back?
I take it, since you're talking about a project that you're writing for Monkeyman, that the answer to that ultimately is yes.
It is, but we're talking about coming back in very small and very tentative ways. One of the things that sort of came up out of that is that none of us are sure that we want to produce theater right now. And so we're talking about a radio play idea, and that's what I'm teasing around it right now. And it took a while because I had to I don't know if this happens for you, but for me, any idea that I come up with arrives with its own format. Arrives with what it's going to be. It's either an idea that can be a poem, it's an idea that can be a short story, it's an idea that can be a play. So I couldn't just take one of my. In fact, we talked about whether or not we could adapt Planet X into a radio play, and eventually decided it wouldn't really work as well because a lot of what made the play work was transitions back and forth between worlds.
Right.
And so I had to sit down and toy through ideas and give my brain time to roam and just sort of try to come up with a radio play idea.
Did you find that, because I tend to be, although I write a lot of dialogue, that I tend to be visual. So the idea of writing, and now that I'm saying it, I don't know if I'm right. I always hear people say radio is a visual medium, but again, you can't just say, you can't have something that relies on people seeing what's going on, Did you find that? Are you finding that a challenge to write with?
I think it's one of the things that is making it a little more difficult to get into. Just sort of allowing my brain to switch tracks that way, because it is my plays are obviously dialogue is really important to me as well, but you very much you think not that I rate stage directions, particularly since Marty always ignores them, but you think about people up there, and you think about what they're going to do and how they're going to look up the moving back and forth up there, and coming up with radio play, and especially because we've started talking about the way we would do it too, and it's important that I when I look at scripts for radio plays, and when I've looked at YouTube videos about how to do it and stuff. They talk about doing it full force, writing in the sound effects and everything. And I don't want to a big part of collaborating with Lisa, our tech person, on this is that she's excited about going in there and deciding on sounds and putting stuff in there. So I'm still only really want to be writing the dialogue and leaving her space to come up with the other stuff that she wants to do, and letting her fill in the gaps to make it visual for the audience, or make it feel rich for the audience. And so the way we're talking about doing it is me just writing the scenes almost like I would for a play, taking them in, and we'll bounce them around. We'll talk about like revisions and things that we're interested in, and then Lisa will go back and start working on what she would want to play with as far as sound. I'll go back and clean up the dialogue, and then Marty, of course, would still be directing.
If you think about it, if she's learned anything from Marty, that you'll write stage directions and they can be ignored. Although on the other side of that, once something is written down, I know they always say actors don't read the stage directions, but we always do, and they always do. Infer, they always infect what we're doing, and we'll always ask about them. Everybody says, "Don't pay any attention to the stage directions." You were saying that with the election and everything, you're feeling a little like you didn't finish it by the end of January.
Yeah.
Are you feeling depleted in terms of that story, or are you still?
I guess what I'm trying to do is give myself permission to go back to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because then I sort of spend a while too being like, okay, how can I weave this other stuff into it so it's touching on deeper things and greater issues. And if that happened, that would be fine. But I kind of feel like I'm making it too hard on myself now too. And so I'm just trying to get back in the headspace where I can let myself just play with the original idea and see what happens.
Is there a specific, are you trying to do like a single radio play of a specific length, or are you thinking episodic for it? Or?
It's something that, we're not committing ourselves to anything at this point, and we're certainly not going to go around saying this is the first episode in an ongoing serial, but it's something that could lend itself to it. It's the basic idea without giving away too much, because Marty will show up out of nowhere and hit me with a 2x4 if I give away too much.
That's what he does.
But the way I sort of pitched it to them is, what if Robert Ripley were two middle-aged lesbians and a potbelly pig?
Okay.
So it's sort of this ongoing adventure story thing with sort of inspired by I know the comic book Lumberjanes and the cartoon Gravity Falls, sort of inspired by these sort of cartoonish adventure cryptozoology kind of things, and sort of creating an episodic thing for that. And Marty, just in our initial discussions, Marty sort of added another layer into it that's kind of fun, sort of grounding in the real world, and there are a lot of places we could take it if it kicked off, but I think right now we're just sort of, let's try doing it once and seeing if it works, and if not, then we haven't committed ourselves to anything this year anyway.
Yeah. Just from a certain point of view, the giving yourself the permission to maybe do something later. You can, once it's finished, once it's written, you can decide on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Decide how long it's going to be. I want to actually jump back to we were talking earlier about your early days in Pennsylvania.
Sure.
When you were at a religious school and things like that. In terms of now, I didn't go to a Christian school, but when I was a lot younger, my family was very fundamentalist, and so we, I could sort of relate. And I knew people who went to a Christian school, and I knew people who were way more fundamentalist than we were, and they were superheroes, that's satanic. Anything that was pop culture, we might have somebody who had eyes that looked evil or something. That's satanic. We can't look at that. Did you find it difficult to get your hands on pop culture stuff? Did your family shy away from it? And if so, when did you start to discover it?
The one real blessing that I think I had was that my parents were fairly focused on their own lives and didn't really pay much attention to what we were doing as kids. They were very much of the plop us in front of the television and go do their own thing and not pay attention to us. So we watched a lot of what we wanted to. Once I started buying books on my own, they weren't really paying attention to the books I bought or read, at the that matter, because we started going to the library and stuff. My mom always took us to the library when we were kids, and I went through the children's section in about a year, and then started taking out adult books. But so they were not paying a lot of attention. Where they did was if it was something they were buying for me. So I was really lagged behind on music. I didn't get into popular music until I was late high school when I started buying things.
Were they buying you Christian rock, or were they anti-rock?
No, they weren't. Like, I started buying myself Christian rock because that was the way that it was, like, acceptable way in. But no, my mother was like big, like Barry Manilow and Beach Boys and like all the like light stuff. And in fact, when I was in 7th grade, and this was one of the years that I switched back and forth to public school, we did in music class. We were doing this project in 7th, and this is again 7th grade, where everybody had to do a presentation on their favorite bands, and so people are going in there and they're doing like Blue Oyster Cult and whatever else was like popular at the time, and I went and did the Beach Boys. So that'll tell you about how popular I was.
I'm going to tell you like an embarrassing story when I was a kid, because I knew that the popular music came on like small 45s, and so in my mind the little records, that was the popular music. So I found a 45 at a garage sale. I didn't even pay attention to what it was. I was like, this is a small record, that means it's popular. So I would be popular at school. So there was like, I think on like Friday afternoons we could put like music on, and so I was like, this is how I'm going to become popular. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it on, which tells you how truly nerdy I was, that I would think that this thing that I hadn't, just because it's this, must mean that it's like going to be popular. So I put it on. It was like Dean Martin singing "Ain't That a Kick in the Head," and by the reaction of everybody in the room, I knew that this was not what I thought it was going to be. And so I very quickly I was like, nope, not that. And I think I got rid of it. I don't know where that went, but like, so I can relate to that.
But it kind of took me in odd ways that I think did like wind up fueling the way that I create now. Certainly. Godzilla came from, like, very literally, like, spending Sunday afternoons sitting there watching old Godzilla movies on, like, whatever the New York channel was that we got in at the time. And a lot of the sort of odd humor that I have is based on the fact that I used to go to, like, Goodwill and buy albums there. I had a record player. And so I had, like, Spike Lee, and I had Stan Freberg, and... Like, these were my comic influences as a child.
Did you ever try to sneak listening to, or had you heard of Dr. Demento at the time and try to sneak that in? Or?
I didn't know about him until later on, but obviously the kind of stuff he was doing. And in fact, it's kind of a funny story. Later on, when I was sort of getting to the point where I was buying some quote-unquote popular stuff, and my mom was sort of vetting very carefully, I bought, it was when Weird Al in 3D came out, and I talked her into it. I'm there at the record store begging her to let me buy it on cassette, and she would only let me buy it if I promised to tape over Nature Trail to Hell, because it had the word hell, and that's all she knows about it.
Of course, yes.
And of course I promised, and of course I never did.
Of course you did. Yeah.
But again, like, once something was in the house, she didn't pay much attention to it, so...
Were you a comic reader? Were you a sci-fi reader? What was you?
I was a big sci-fi reader. I didn't get into comic books. Well, I was in comic books much when I was a little kid, but then I didn't get back into them really until university, when I was like buying stuff on my own. But sci-fi novels all the way. Like, I would go to... My favorite day of the year wasn't a holiday. My favorite day of the year was when the library would have their big book sale, and by the end of the day, they would just want to clear out the tables, so you could give them like $5 and fill a garbage, like on a garbage bag, but like a shopping bag full of books. And I would do that. I would do that like 3 or 4 times, and I would be like waddling home.
Of course, yeah. For me in school, it was the Scholastic Book Fair, like the book fair day, which was like, what book you're gonna get. You get the magazine, and you like agonize over. I can only have one. Did you ever doubt bringing pop culture into theater? Was there ever a time when you were like, I don't know if this counts because of the topic, or did you just know that it was a thing that you wanted to do?
I think certainly at first it helped, like when we had the company and I had Marty and Brad and Tim, and we were just really, instead of focusing on whether or not it was real theater, we were like, finally we're having fun doing this thing. But certainly it's something I still agonize about, because we've been doing this for, 7 years, because we took last year off. And our audiences still usually range around maybe 120, 130 over the run of a show. And that's not enough that's barely enough to keep from losing money every year.
Have you thought, obviously, in indie theater, the biggest barrier is, aside from money, is advertising and getting the word out, which is literally like what, like if you can't advertise, you can't get an audience. So if you can't crack that nut, what do you do? And of course, all of that stuff costs money. Have you guys ever thought about consider what you might be missing to take it further, or is there anything that like comes to mind when you think about that, or is it just like I don't know what it is, how we crack that nut?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot, but I don't think any of us really has been able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. I think we all feel like the quality of the shows we're putting on is like sufficient. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we keep trying to make things better, obviously, but I feel like we're doing good shows. I feel like we're just not good at getting the word out there, and I feel like our audience... We started out really deliberately trying to target a non-theater audience mm-hmm. because theater audiences weren't really interested in what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And we had them for a while, but it's been really hard to retain that audience.
I guess that I mean, the non-theater audience is going to come for a specific thing.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to come when you're doing something that sort of speaks to them right now. They're not going to be your audience. They're a fickle lover. They're not going
It's fair. Well, I mean, so are regular theater
audiences. Yeah.
but
the thing about regular theater audiences is they tend to be people who like they're inclined to go to theater, and so if you can like give them some kind of tagline that's going to be interesting to them, they're going to come out. Yeah. But there are very few people who can target that non-theater audience and keep them coming back. Yeah. I mean, somebody like Theater Brouhaha, Kat Sandler and the gang, they're really good at that. They could almost do like, are you guys listening? Do a class, do like some kind of course that people can come to and learn from you because you are doing the Lord's work.
But again, I feel like the audience they're targeting, and I just I had sort of like been catching up on Stage Worthy a little bit beforehand, and I listened to your conversation with Tom again, and he talks about very much like they're targeting that very sort of like young metro audience, and I feel like that's an audience that goes out and does things more in general, and is more likely to go out. Like our target audience is more likely to stay home and like watch Civil War.
The thing is that I wonder if like your target audience, because nerd shit is more popular than it has ever been, and I don't know that just to play devil's advocate on that.
That's fair.
Because I think that maybe your audience they just need to know about it. Because if people go to see, like, they'll go to the movie theater to watch Star Wars, to watch this, that, to watch the Marvel movie. If something tickles them, if they can have an experience, if it's something that they want, I think they would go. But it's that whole, like, how do you reach them?
Yeah, and that's fair, and I mean, obviously, that's like what we counted on for a long time. Well, but I do feel like part of the problem is like none of us are just really that great at promotion, and something we tried to teach ourselves and never been that good at. And then we sort of hit a point around year 5 or so where fatigue really, really set in. I mean, we've been doing for 7 years. We did at least 2, sometimes 3 productions a year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And it wasn't like we were trading off. It was usually the same people. It wound up. We started sort of like bleeding members after a while. Real Life got to a bunch of them, and other projects got to a bunch of them, and it wound up being the same core 3 or 4 people who were producing and directing and writing every show.
That is a lot, and especially when you're out of your comfort zone. Because you know what, producing is one thing on its own, but then when you have to pile marketing on top of that, like just when you're thinking about, okay, so I need money I need a space, I need costumes, I need this, that, and the other thing. Oh, and now you have to write a press release, and you have to talk to people and get the word out. That is not an easy thing, and more and more I'm understanding, why people splurge for like a publicity person or a marketing person. Now that shit ain't cheap,
unfortunately.
So I don't know how indie theater is going to do it, but I don't know. There's got to be a way. And if I knew, I would tell you, and we would laugh all the way to the bank with the next with Nerd Hamilton or whatever it is that we would create. Do you? I mean, you're sort of like with Monkeyman, sort of putting your feet back into the water a little bit after your year of a break. Do you feel like you guys are hungry to do something, or are you really sort of like you're going to do this radio thing, and if that doesn't work, you're done? Or do you think that there is this thing that you guys do has a future?
I think that's sort of where we're struggling right now. We're struggling. I mean, it's not necessarily this particular project, but it's the fact that we sat down and this was the only one that seemed really viable at the moment. But just the fact that we're not, I don't want to say strong enough, but we're not together enough right now to reach out and try to pull other people in. Yeah. You kind of have to have like a solid base and a solid idea of what you're asking people to commit to do that. And we don't really have the money to throw at things right now, so we have to start small. And I think we're just sort of, it was good to have a year off, and I tried a bunch of things that I hadn't gotten to try before. I got to play around with interactive fiction, which is something I always wanted to do. I got to write some little pieces that were completely unlike anything that Monkeyman would ever produce, and send those out into the world.
And you revisited
Inked Heart.
Inked Heart, which you got to do.
Yeah, which again was something that Monkeyman was never going to wind up producing. So
I remember when there was a time we were talking about it, but it didn't quite fit with Monkeyman's usual thing. Have you found creatively that taking? I mean, you've done all these things. Do you feel like after 2016 a little bit rejuvenated in creatively, or do you feel like not doing stuff has been?
I think I will when I can start writing again. Like, seriously, and it's not just politically. Like, I had some other stuff. I had some health struggles, and I almost got fired, which can be a huge thing. But like a lot of other things I was struggling with in the past couple of months. But definitely, I feel like I can, and I'm starting to lift my head again. I'm starting to think about things, but it was such a huge blow, and honestly, it still killed me when we sat down and talked about like whether or not we were going to start again. The one thing we had to start with was we can't go back and do Planet X right now. We just can't start with that. We lost too much trying to do it last time to try to rebuild from that point, and it just killed me.
Well, it also, I mean, I can see from a certain point of view, like this is the thing that sort of like made you have to take the time off. Yeah. Is this the thing to start again with? And if it demoralized you when it didn't work out, then like why would you want to face it again so soon?
Because we put everything into it. Because like it literally that year, 2015, I went through probably 5 rewrites of it, 5 major rewrites of it with Marty, and we changed huge chunks of it. Yeah. He came up with a lot of stuff for it. He came up with making the character non-binary, which was a huge like step forward and something else that we had wanted to do. We've talked a lot about representation. We went through casting very deliberately, making sure that we had a multicultural cast, because one of the things I said was, okay, if we're doing an office story, there's no office I've ever been in Toronto that it's all white people.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And but so we were pushing for all these things and like taking all these steps, and we felt like we were also proud of what was coming together, and then to sort of be cut off at the knees. You
always put everything into like stuff when you do it, right? I mean, if you didn't, you wouldn't be doing it, right? I mean, if you didn't, if your heart wasn't in it, you wouldn't be you wouldn't be throwing money at that. You'd be saving it for a vacation or something.
Yeah, that's fair. But it felt like a big step forward for us in a lot of ways, and so it was hard to talk about starting again and say, okay, we're starting again from doing very small. We're starting again from doing the sort of thing that we could have done the first year.
Right. Well, I mean, the theater landscape has changed in a certain way. In fact, in 2016, the theater landscape changed hugely. I mean, we lost a number of independent spaces.
Yeah, that's the thing now, is that like it's getting harder and harder to find space, much less afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's still a little bit more than there was when your choices were Palmerston Library, Factory, Passe Muraille, or Tarragon.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just to lose these independent spaces is a blow on its own. But, I mean, that's changed the landscape, and, you know, it's hard to face it again sometimes, I guess, you know? are there themes, like, as you start to, bring your, lift your head up from, all of the, and let's face it, right now when we're recording this things are shit.
They really
politically,
are.
It is
worse
shit.
Every day.
It is hard to like wake up in the morning and feel like I'm like, this is a day to create a thing. Are there things that you're finding that are, as you're lifting your head out of the post-election blanket, that are fueling you, that are attracting you to stories, or are you still trying to find those?
I think certainly there are things in like pop culture that are still inspiring me. I'm a huge fan of Steven Universe right now, which I know you've seen me like post about a million times and talk about, and I have a tattoo of, for God's sake. Like 6 months after I started watching the show, I got a tattoo based on it. But and one of the things I like most about that is that it manages to deal with some pretty weighty stuff, but it's overwhelmingly positive. And even like when they introduce a character who seems evil or seems like antagonistic, that eventually there's a chance that they can be redeemed. And I just feel like, and I've never really done this, I mean, my work, it's fun, it's like dorky, but there aren't a whole lot of really like happy endings. And one of the things that I wrote that I was proudest of last year, like Inktar was great, but Inktar was pretty much already there. It was just cleaning it up and making it and like polishing it. Was a little 10-minute play called Stars, which is just like 2 long distance. And I very specifically said I didn't want them to be like recognizably like male or female, just sort of these like agender characters like talking on the phone from across the world and just like having this like random little conversation looking up at the stars, and you eventually find out that like they're in love and they haven't met yet. And so it's just about like this little positive little thing about them building each other up and like bolstering each other through this, having to be apart. And it's nothing that I would have written like even a year or two before that, because I would have felt some need at the end to sort of like put in a twist or put in a, well, we're probably never going to meet or something like that. But I just feeling like, and it's not that there's anything wrong with telling stories the other way, but I really feel like right now I have to find ways to like add to the positive energy in the world through my work. And so that's why like the radio play idea, if it works, is it's not ever going to be a big weighty thing, but it's about like adventure and exploring and like these 2 characters being like head over heels in love with each other. And
I think we need that. I think that more, as the weeks go on, and although people were angry, that's hard to sustain, and you need a break from that now and then. You need a Stranger Things to come along to remind you that there's awesome in the world occasionally,
Well, it's like, and by the time this comes out, it'll be okay to say this. I won't be like spoiling it for anyone. Like I was showing you the picture of the tattoo I'm getting this weekend, which is a Muppet movie tattoo, and it's based on like the lyrics from the song at the very end, which is one of the 2 places in the movie I always break down in tears every time since I was a kid. Every time, but the reason why that resonates so much is I'm probably going to like mess up just talking again, but it's about creating, and it's about like finding people that you work with and like enjoy working with and just making that your life. And that's, I think, the reason why we haven't let go of Monkeyman yet is because I sit down with Marty, and I sit down with Lisa, and I sit down with Tim, and we joke about things, and we talk about the stuff we've done and the stuff we might do in the future. And that becomes like, that conversation becomes the most rejuvenating thing in my life at that point. Amazing.
And that's why it's important for you, and it's why it's important for them, and it's why it's important for the rest of us, I think. Well, DJ, thank you so much for coming out. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for inviting me.